It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of Bank Information. Take charge of your financial future with Your Personal Bank. Now here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. You know, like I said, I've shared this many times. Typically, the first show of the week, I like to focus more on the details of the Your Personal Bank concept, how it works and all that. And then the second show of the week, I like to take a bigger picture view. If you listen to the last show, I was really talking a lot of bigger picture stuff. Inflation, highest rates we've seen ever for business inflation. 40% increases in gas and used cars, for example, over the last year. I was talking about the government spending, historic, unprecedented levels of it, and them continuing to propose to spend more, which will only add to this inflation problem, which doesn't make it transitory. So what the Federal Reserve is saying, I do not believe. But if you did miss the last show, I really encourage you, go to yourpersonalbank.com, check it out. You can listen to any of the previously recorded shows. And if you want more information on Your Personal Bank, you can go there. Again, yourpersonalbank.com, or contact me at toll-free 866-268-4422. Again, 866-268-4422. The second show of the week is usually the bigger picture stuff, and there's plenty of bigger picture stuff to talk about, so we're going to just hit it. So I was talking a lot about this poll in the last show where roughly 60% of registered Democrats now favor socialism over capitalism. And I also was seeing some, and socialism, of course, is part of Marxism. It's part of big government. It's income redistribution. It's basically taking the cookie from those who have it, breaking it in half and giving it to the others that don't, because it seems fair. But what they don't understand was the folks weren't given the cookie. They worked for that cookie. They worked hard, and the other folks didn't. And to be taken from somebody who worked hard, made good decisions, all that, take it from them to give it to somebody who doesn't, how is that fair? That's the question that needs to be asked, really. But this other thing I saw, I was watching some video recently, which frankly, it put a chill up my spine. It's probably one of the most disturbing videos I have watched in a very, very long time. And what the video was, is I was watching French police walking around, checking people's papers at cafes in France. Now, you may look at that and say, that's not such a big deal. Folks, I'm a history buff. I'm also half Hungarian. My dad escaped from the Soviets in 1956. He was, his life was threatened, okay? He had his life, and put his life in his hands to get out of there and escape. I've served in the military to protect and preserve the freedoms that we have that are unprecedented in human history. If you don't believe that, just look at history, real history, not revisionist stuff. In fact, a good idea is if you're going to read a book, I know read something written prior to World War II. That's very helpful, or go online or whatever. But look at the dates on it. Look at the source. Unfortunately, whenever you look at an article these days, or a book or a source, or read anything, you have to check the source first. Didn't used to, but that's unfortunately the case. I check the source now before I read, because how much credibility does it really have? But that's another point. Why did that video of police checking people's papers at cafes in France send a chill up my spine? Folks, it's really quite simple. That's what the Gestapo used to do. It's also what the Soviets continue to do. Communist China continues to do similar things. Cuba, North Korea, take your pick. Folks, we have cities in the United States that are implementing similar restrictions, a COVID vaccine or whatever it is, to be able to say, go to a restaurant. Folks, that should send a chill up your spine. The fact that people are willing to even go along with that is mind-boggling, given the history of freedom that we have had as a country. Obviously, these things are happening in states that are predominantly blue, heavily Democratic. And again, I didn't understand it until I did more research and looked at this and realized, well, if the majority of registered Democrats favor socialism over capitalism, well, by definition, they favor this kind of stuff. Now, again, fortunately, it's only about a third of the country, actually, currently. There's been a lot of damage done from our academic areas, entertainment, big business. You know, if you're a parent and you're allowing your children to be exposed to this stuff and taught this stuff, you need to step up and realize it and stop it. Either change the school they're in, put them in a private school, a charter school, an online school, homeschool. One of the things that COVID has done, one of the positives, is it's woken people up to the other options that really exist out there, instead of just sending them to the schools and letting our kids be indoctrinated by these Marxist and socialist ideas and anti-American ideas, anti-freedom, and it's our own fault. We were asleep at the wheel as parents. Now, my wife and I figured this out a couple of years ago, and we pulled our daughters, teenage daughters, out, and there were other reasons, but this was one of them. And they were in one of the better public schools, by the way, but still, we got them out of there. They've been on online high school, and in their case, this was a great fit for both of them, and they absolutely love it, and they're thriving, and they're learning more, and they're not, but most importantly, they're not being indoctrinated into ideologies that we do not agree with. Why would I, as a father who served in the military to protect and preserve freedoms we have as a country, as individuals, that are unprecedented in history? This democracy and the Founding Fathers and the Declaration and the Constitution were revolutionary. That's why they call it the Revolutionary War. Types of governments prior to that all basically involved top-down government control, monarchies, dictatorships, communism, things like this. This was an experiment that many didn't think would last. It's lasted over 200 years, thankfully. Why would I invest several years of my life to help support and preserve and defend these freedoms, then to allow my own children to be taught something that I completely disagree with? That is completely and totally foolish, and would be a dereliction of duty on my part as a parent. I understand it's easier just to send the kids to school. And that's what the public school system and big government counts on. It's just easier. It's the path of least resistance. Folks, this is where it's time to step up, wake up, smell the coffee, and take action as a parent and make sure your kids are being taught what you believe in. And put them in a position where they'll learn those things, whatever that may be. And it's probably not public school. We've seen that. Unless you want them to learn about critical race theory, for example. My point is simple. Take charge, take control while you still have it. And this is what the majority of parents need. There's a revolution going on in the parents' world, and it's very encouraging. That's where source of excitement and encouragement comes from. But more parents need to step up. The vast majority need to say, no, I don't agree with this, and either join the school board, change the policies of the school, run for school board, get in charge, or get your kids out of there and get them somewhere else. There's all kinds of options. Take advantage of them. Charter schools are free. Online schools are free also. And private schools may be an option. There's some costs there typically, but it could be a better option for your family, or homeschooling might be the best option. But choose something that's better for your children in the future, not just what's the path of least resistance. See, folks, this is the type of stuff we're going to have to step up and do. The days of us just going to vote, for example, and assuming everything's just going to work out are over. We have an activist minority, about a third right now, according to the polls, who are in favor of making major changes, and they happen to be in control and happen to be very active and invigorated, and I believe overstepping their bounds far beyond what anybody thought they would do. But it's time for the silent majority to stop being silent. Get involved with politics, get involved with local politics, find out who you're actually voting for. Don't just vote down the ticket when you vote just because you've always done it that way. Know who you're voting for. Find out what they actually stand for. You know, it's not that hard these days. You can go online and do a little research. You can get involved. You can work in the polling places. And by the way, not just in your local area, go volunteer for somewhere that's has a history of not being so clean. How's that? Or maybe you don't necessarily agree with. Things like that. There's voting with your pocketbooks is also another way of doing things. But we're going to have to do these things. Otherwise, if we continue to allow our current administration, government, and all that just to inflate our money, spend it like a drunken sailor, cause massive economic change and damage will occur as a result. I don't believe that's an if anymore. We're already seeing historic numbers. Those don't just go away. Okay? They just don't go away. There's going to be repercussions as a result, is my point. And to allow I mean the fact that the police are actually willing to check people's papers in a free country is mind-boggling. They should refuse. They should just absolutely, categorically refuse. There are a handful of cases we see, but far fewer than there should be. Teachers who don't believe in critical race theory and things like that should absolutely refuse to teach it. You know, we need people to stand up for what they believe in. And I understand it might be difficult sometimes. It might make a major impact in your life. But here's what we need to understand. If you don't, there's going to be major impacts anyway. Ones that you very likely will not like will in fact impact your life, your freedoms, your family, your business, your money, your ability to make money, your ability to keep it, and the ability to pass it on. It's going to make tremendous impacts on your life in a negative way for most people if you don't stand up and do something, stand up against it. And many are. So be encouraged. Many are. But if you haven't, please join the fight. Stay tuned in the next segment. I'm going to talk about some more of these things, so don't miss it because this is a good one.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And as I shared in the first segment, I saw one of the most chilling videos I think I've seen, and as long as I can remember. And that video was watching French police check the papers of folks, French citizens, just eating at cafes to see if they had the COVID vaccine thing. Folks, the reason why that's so chilling is France is supposedly a democracy, supposedly has freedom. They've enacted these, in my opinion, draconian measures, and the majority of French citizens apparently are in favor of it, although to their credit, there's been tremendous protests against this. But the fact that French police are checking people's papers should run a chill up your spine. And the reason is very simple. That's exactly what the Gestapo used to do. They do it in communist countries today. Do we want to be a Cuba, a Russia, a China, a North Korea? That is the direction that some of our cities are going, like New York and places in California, wanting to enact these kind of draconian measures where police could come and require you to check your papers, and you're just at a restaurant. Is that freedom? Is that something we should allow or go along with? And what's next? See, I have some personal history with this, folks. personal family history. My dad escaped from communist Soviets from Hungary. And the family stories go. I've talked to people personally who lived in that time when they first started, before they were in charge. And, Mark Twain said this: history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I think it was Benjamin Franklin, who said, those who fail to learn from the lessons from history are doomed to repeat them. I believe it was him. My point is simple. These are the same types of approaches, the same type of things that the Soviets did in Hungary before they took over. The steps that they're doing, the processes that they're using, understand, Hungary after World War II had been devastated. Their economy was terrible. They had suffered through Nazi occupation, World War II. It was bad. And so the communists, the Soviets at the time, came along and basically promised a lot of stuff. They promised this, they promised that, they promised the world. And to a lot of people, it sounded good. And so people started to vote for them, and they started getting getting more and more members in parliament. And then they managed, in essence, a coup and took over. They got a majority. Right now, I've shared with this, the polls show about a third of Americans favor socialism over capitalism. They're not the majority yet. Many of them happen to be in control right now, and if we allow them to maintain control, what's going to happen next? History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Look, I was in France a couple of years ago. I'm so thankful that I was there then. It would be extraordinarily sad to me to have to be there now and realize that if you didn't have the COVID passport, you couldn't eat at a cafe. The fact that just to see it would be, I don't know. I don't know how I would react. It would be very, very traumatic. How's that? And look, if you haven't watched that video or something like that, go watch an old video Gestapo checking people's papers, or the Russian Soviets doing that, or Chinese. There's videos that exist. You can find them. Is that the type of society you want to live in? Because, folks, the attacks on our freedom are continuing, and that's the direction that our current party, administration, political folks are headed. It's great for the elites, the folks that are in charge. They gain more control. More control typically equals more money. I understand why the elites favor socialism and Marxism and communism even, or dictatorships and all those kinds of things. It's easier. It's cleaner. Democracy's messy. Okay? I understand that. It's the 30% I don't understand, other than they've just been convinced. That's what they've been taught. Again, I talked about this in a previous segment where many people have allowed their kids, young people, to go to schools and colleges and allowed them to be taught this stuff and indoctrinated, frankly. And it's the parents' fault. It's being asleep at the wheel. We can't afford to be asleep at the wheel anymore, or we're going to be in a position like my wife asked me the other day. She goes, what if they're talking about implementing this nationwide, folks. What if we can't go to a restaurant because we don't have the COVID passport? And my statement to her was, well, I guess we just don't go to eat. I had COVID, by the way. I've got the antibodies. I've been told by 2 different doctors that I'm immune. I've been exposed to it a half a dozen times since I had it. I was one of the early ones. Was it fun? No. Was I afraid of dying from it? No, because I'm a low risk person. I wasn't concerned about it. My mom, for example, older, health issues, she went and got the vaccine. I encouraged her to do so because I believed that was important. Here's the thing. Whether you have the vaccine or not, this should be your decision, and I respect that decision either way. There should be no pressure from anyone Either way, there can be recommendations. That's fine. I have no issue with that. But it's an individual medical decision. Anybody ever heard of the HIPAA privacy laws, for example? These are being infringed upon. There's a tremendous amount of pressure and fear campaign going on to get people to do things and act a certain way, and that should send a chill up your spine. Because if they're willing to go to the lengths that we're seeing it in France, we're starting to see it like in New York and California. If they're willing to go to the point where police will be checking your papers if you go to a restaurant, what else are they willing to do? See, government has a history. All governments have a history of wanting to take and grab more power. Bureaucrats love it. Elected officials love it. They gain more control. They gain more power. They gain more money. This is the thing we need to understand and protect against and fight against in every way, shape possible. We have legal methods of doing it now. We can vote with our pocketbook. We can vote at the polls. We can not support or encourage or buy into the propaganda that we're getting. The key is think. Please think about the future. What kind of future are we going to have as a society? What kind of future do you want to have as a society? What kind of future do you want to see your family and your kids and your grandkids have? Step up. Let's make a difference. And one of the ways, too, is you can step up with your pocketbook, with your money, and protect yourself against inflation and the things that are happening as we speak right now. You need to take some steps to protect yourself so that you can maintain some control. That's what they want to take away from you. They want control. I want to show you how to keep it, so stay tuned in the next segment.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. We're talking about control. What does the government want? What do elected officials want? What do bureaucrats want? Well, elected officials are simple. They want to be elected, and they want to be reelected. Government bureaucrats are also quite simple. They want control. They want power. Control, by the way, elected officials like that too. Control gives you power. Power equals prestige and money. What can we do to reduce their control? Basically, anything involved with the government, the federal government in particular, if you have an option to opt out, exercise out of it, not be a part of it, that's the option you probably should choose. Now, one of the biggest areas of control that the federal government has over the citizens is the ability to tax those citizens. And one of the biggest areas that most investors are faced with on taxes are IRAs, 401ks, those types of accounts, qualified accounts. Here's the problem with a qualified account. There's the advantage and there's the disadvantage. The advantage is if you contribute into one of these, you can defer the taxes to some point in the future when you distribute the money. You can reduce your current income taxes. Now, if tax rates will be lower in the future, that's a good strategy because you would defer the tax now to pay it later at a lower rate. But given the level of the government debt where we're at right now and where they want to go, who believes we're going to have a lower tax rate in the future? Remember, we have historic, unprecedented debt, and there's a couple of ways. There's three ways, basically, the government can reduce that if they have a desire to at all, even at all. One is increase taxes. Two is to reduce spending. Right now, that's laughable. And three is to inflate their way out of it. In other words, keep interest rates low, which is what they're doing currently, to keep the interest payments low. The problem we see with that option, though, is that one eventually will be taken off the table. And many economists are now saying within the next 10 years, some less, with current levels of spending. That's not new spending bills that are being proposed. Current spending, we have approximately 10 years before the current revenues the government receives, total revenues, will just pay the interest on the debt alone, not the principal, just the interest. And folks, if the government fails to pay interest, we're talking about catastrophic economic impact. The thing is, and I'm not saying we're going to go there. I certainly hope that never happens. But what I'm getting at is the government will be under increasing pressure to gain more revenue just to pay the interest. And again, primarily, raising taxes is one of the best ways to do it. And one of the biggest pools of money that the government does not have full control of right now, yet, is qualified funds. There are trillions of dollars set aside in qualified accounts. The federal government sets the tax rate, the rules on the taxes when those funds are accessed. The question is simple. Can they change those rules in the future? We all know that answer. And of course, the answer is yes. My point is, if you're deferring taxes now to pay them at a rate and later in the future, it's a future unknown rate. Therefore, you have tax risk. There's a book called The Power of Zero by David McKnight. If you have an IRA, 401k, or qualified account, you need to read the book, The Power of Zero by David McKnight. It will open your eyes to the risk, the future tax risk that you have. Also, the argument can be made is it makes sense to defer taxes on a small amount of money, the seed, your contributions, now, to then later pay it on the harvest, hopefully a larger amount, at an unknown future rate, quite likely higher. When you look at it that way and you ask that question, it doesn't make logical sense for most people. So many times what we do is if somebody is contributing into an IRA or 401k or any kind of qualified account, we oftentimes run the numbers and compare stopping the contributions into the tax-deferred account and instead funding a tax-free account. What that does is that eliminates future tax liability on those dollars. This is very important and becomes increasingly important as the government owes more and more money and potentially be under more pressure to increase taxes. I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment. I'm going to go into this further. Of course, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com or give me a call at 866-268-4422.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And I guess if you haven't got the gist of it, it's really, if you're a fiscal conservative, if you feel like fiscal responsibility is important, it really has become an us versus them proposition. In other words, the federal government is spending money like a drunken sailor, never spent so much money in history. This is unprecedented. Has unprecedented levels of, historic levels of debt. Is actively pursuing to spend much, much more. The Federal Reserve, I believe, under heavy political pressure, is continuing to maintain easy monetary policy, low interest rate, all environment, all that, which further fuels the flame for inflation in the future, but keeps the interest on the debt low, which benefits the government and big business, particularly multinational big businesses, easy access to money and low cost of money, but hurts the typical average individual citizen. Again, it's an us versus them. What I'm going to say is many people, when they invest in a portfolio, think about risk and risk tolerance and the risk strategy and defensive, and they'll invest defensively, and you hear many of these types of terms. What needs to happen now for many people, and it hasn't been necessary before, but because our government, again, has, in my opinion, gone off the rails and is just like spending money like a drunken sailor. I don't know how else to put it. You need to start thinking strategically and defensively from a tax strategy standpoint. What's your future tax risk? I would venture to say the tax risk, future tax rates, the risk is much higher today than it was even a couple of years ago in terms of higher tax rates than what we saw before, mainly because of the level of debt. Looking at alternatives like your personal bank where you can grow your money tax-free, access it tax-free, and pass it on to your heirs tax-free is becoming vitally important and more important by the day as our government continues the current actions that they're at. Until we get some fiscal responsibility in our federal government, this is going to be important. Fiscal responsibility in our federal government is going to be a huge battle. There's many people out there that talk about a balanced budget amendment. There's pluses and minuses of that. Term limits, of course. Many other things out there that could help. But the reality is, the biggest way, the most direct way I see, is there needs to be a change in the mindset of the majority of Americans. And again, we're not going to convince the roughly third of Americans that favor socialism over capitalism. They're Marxists, basically. They favor big government. They favor income redistribution. They favor high taxes. You're not going to convince them. But again, that's only about a third, according to many, many polls. And there's your fiscal conservatives out there, which, based on many studies, is roughly about a third to 40% of the population. So you're not alone. Don't feel like you are. It's the 20-30% in the middle. We need to convince, you have a change of mindset with many of them that this is important, and this is an issue, an electable issue. In other words, your vote, you're either going to vote or not vote on this person based on their fiscal policy. Are they going to be fiscally responsible or not? Are we going to hold their feet to the fire or not? And until we can get to that point, and I'm hopeful that we are rapidly approaching that, because again, as economic numbers get worse, inflation gets higher, costs of goods and services go up, all these things happen, these dramatic changes start to happen. Bill Clinton said it best when he said it's the economy, stupid, right? People will start voting with their wallet. I believe the change is coming. But until we get there, and here's the thing, we got to protect ourselves. You got to be defensive from a tax standpoint. It's a risk. It's a risk just like market risk, loss of principal risk. It needs to become a bigger and bigger factor in somebody's thinking in terms of investing, being defensive, and protecting yourself for the future. Your personal bank is one of the few assets out there that you can grow the money, access it, and pass it on to your heirs tax-free. Obviously, we have to set it up properly, which we do. We can get you positive arbitrage on top of it and all kinds of good stuff. Lots of liquidity, all that fun stuff. But the thing is, you need to start thinking more defensively and start thinking more of a tax diversification strategy. And like I said earlier in the last segment, The Power of Zero by David McKnight. If you have an IRA or 401k, qualified account, you need to read that book. You need to understand your future tax liability. I can't tell you how many times I've had folks read. I've recommended that book many, many times for many years. And how many people, they read the book, they contact me, and they say, wow, we need to talk. I had no idea. No one's ever discussed this with me. And folks, it's much more important today than it's ever been because of the levels of government debt that we are facing. Contact me at toll-free 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com for more info. I can share with you how to create a defensive tax strategy, diversify some of your assets, your portfolio, whatever, have liquidity, have some guarantees, get some certainty, and most importantly, gain back control of some of your money. Take it out of the control of the politicians and the bureaucrats who, frankly, again, if you're fiscally responsible, they are not your friend. And by the way, what's ironic is if you're an investor, in most cases, you're pretty fiscally responsible. Otherwise, you wouldn't be an investor. You wouldn't have anything to invest with, would you? The point is, to invest, you need seed money. You need to start somewhere, and how do you do that? Well, you have to have extra, more and above than what you spend, right? Which means you made some decisions, took some actions to be fiscally responsible. It becomes a lifestyle and allows you to build wealth. That wealth is under threat. Now, I get a lot of people say, well, I've already done the IRA 401k. I've already done the contribution. I'm retired. I'm now, I'm either letting it roll or I'm getting to start to take it out. What can I do? Do I have an option? The answer is yes, you do. There are many strategies out there that we call it, see, if you're deferring money into an account, like a qualified account, to then pay the taxes when you take it out, many people call that a ticking tax time bomb. I mean, the tax bomb is going to blow up in your face, and the problem is you have no idea how much it's going to be or when you take it out, right? In other words, can you tell me what the tax rates are going to be in 5 years or 10 or 20 or more? And the answer is no. It's absolutely impossible. Is the likelihood greater that it'll be higher or lower? Well, most people believe, and experts agree, based on current debt levels and future spending that the federal government continues to want, they continue to want to spend money like a drunken sailor, the risk to higher tax rates is increasing exponentially. And higher inflation rates, we've seen the highest business inflation rates ever in history this past year. Ever. These things will come back to haunt us, okay? Interest rates are most likely going to be affected by this. You want an investment that's going to shine, that's going to thrive in a higher rate interest environment, and going to thrive in a higher tax environment. And your personal bank does that, both of those things, in a big way. Now, a lot of people understand that we set up a high cash value policy, and then we set up a bank line of credit to access the funds and create positive arbitrage. Many people will say, hey, well, I'm too old or unhealthy to qualify for that. Don't let that stop you. Many times people are surprised they get qualified. Like I said, I've shared this many times. I have clients up the age of 79 who have successfully qualified and are clients and have done this and put their money, the numbers made sense, okay? They were relatively healthy, don't get me wrong, but nothing extraordinary. But even if that's the case, you can't because of health or age reasons. You can still own one of these and insure somebody else, okay? As long as you have some insurable interest. And that typically means a family member, business associate, those types of situations. We can look at alternatives for you. You're the owner. You control it. You get the tax benefits. You get the diversification. You get the positive arbitrage. You get all the benefits we're talking about. You control your money. You don't have to worry about what the future tax rates are from Congress. That's who controls it. You don't have to worry about that stuff. You can take that future tax liability off the table on those dollars. Contact me at yourpersonalbank.com for more information or toll free 866-268-4422. I can share with you how this works, how you can gain control back of your money. Let's stop giving control to the politicians and the bureaucrats. Let's stop listening to them. They are not your friend. Again, if you are a fiscally responsible person, our current federal government, our current elected officials, our current bureaucrats are not your friend. Why are you counting on them? Why are you even listening to them? In other words, if you're a fiscally responsible person, in my opinion, you should believe and listen to, they should have as much credibility in your mind. Now, I'm talking about politicians, bureaucrats, the legacy media right now, because they're supporting all this stuff. They should have as much credibility in your mind as a sleazy used car salesman has, which basically is close to zero. Once in a blue moon, they'll do or say something that I agree with, those types of folks. But the reality is they are not your friend. They are looking out for themselves to benefit themselves. In most cases, there are exceptions. They want to be elected. They want to be reelected. They want power. They want money. That's the things that the leadership particularly wants. They don't want to help you. They say the things that they need to say to make it sound good, just like a sleazy used car salesman when they tell you this car's only been driven on Sundays by a little old lady to church. And the reality is the car's been, the odometer's been rolled back a few tens of thousands of miles, and they're selling you a lemon, and they know it. That's the sad truth. And the fact is, the more people that we get to help understand that and recognize that fact, and like I said, we only need a few. Most presidential elections are 51-49% affairs. So we only need a couple percent. We only need a few folks, and typically those are the ones in the middle. You can count on the fiscal conservatives. You can't count on the Marxist, socialists, communists, radicals. But we just need to get to the middle, the moderates, the independents, both Democrat and Republican moderates. Help them understand, help them educate, help them gain control of their future, their money, their family, their business, their country, and be proud of this thing again, of the direction that we're going, that is. I'm proud of our country, and I'm proud of the people that are in it, and I'm proud to have served this country in the military. I'm not proud of the direction it's going. Hopefully that will change soon. Stay tuned. As always, the Your Personal Bank Show. Contact me at yourpersonalbank.com for more information, or 866-268-4422.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com.